School District 46 Board of Education meeting Wednesday, October 21st, starting now at 6:30 p.m. Can we call to order and do a roll call, please?
Mac.
Here.
Braden.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
And Strack.
Here. Okay. That's quorum. We will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. We need an approval of the agenda, please. A motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Second.
Okay.
Miller.
Aye.
Strack.
Aye.
Mac.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
LaCroix.
Aye. All right, the agenda is approved. We did open the public comments for the first round tonight. Do we have anything, Chris, to share?
At this time, there are no public comments.
No public comments. I did get a message that said we started streaming. Do we know?
Mr. Vipon, can you confirm that we're?
Yeah, just checking.
I'm showing us live.
Yeah, I think it was an alert that we just didn't close.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right, no public comments at the moment. We'll move on to board reports to start off the evening. Anybody have a board report to share?
Yes, I do. I wanted just to give you, just to say thank you for our community engagement committee. We met this morning and lots of exciting things going on that I'll tell you about in the report for the community engagement, but also wanted to let you know that I've reached out to the library and they have agreed to publish some of the flyers for some of our work. So just a small step in a good direction. Wanted to share that with the board. So that's it.
Wonderful, thank you. Other members?
Hi, Stephen. This is Jason. I'd like something to say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, in consideration of the move to a hybrid plan, we received so many emails from our community and from our teachers. The board received a lot of these emails, and I just wanted to explicitly acknowledge that, every point of view that we got, we considered in our deliberations whether or not we responded formally to these emails. And I just wanted to say thank you to the community members and the staff members for sharing their opinions, because I think that these decisions are better made with as many points of view as possible. And I just wanted to explicitly acknowledge that these emails were read, they were heard, and to thank you for sharing and continue to do so. And we have a lot more decisions to make in the future, and I'd like to continue to impress that all these various disparate viewpoints are very important to us. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Jason. I agree. Other board members? Okay, Dr. Glickman, we'll move to you and the superintendent's report for this evening.
Certainly. Well, there are two items tonight. In a moment, I will start talking with you about the metrics and the change in our plans. And after that, I will hand it over to Mr. Vipond, who has some really nice and exciting news to share from the technology department. But we'll go ahead and get started talking about those metrics and what it means to us. So I'm going to ask Mr. Vipond if you would get those slides up for us. Perfect. All right. Well, as we know, quite a lot has changed since we were last together 1 week ago. Specifically, our metrics have changed, enough so that yesterday the Lake County Health Department recommended virtual, what we call remote, learning for students throughout the county. And as I shared with our community yesterday, this means pushing back the start of hybrid learning for our students and staying in a remote setting for all students for a while longer. This does not mean, though, that we are halting our planning process for hybrid learning, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. First, though, we will look at the metrics together. So this first chart shows us incidence rates. And we are looking at incidence rates as the health department based their recommendation on the rise in incidence rates in the county. The 7-day rolling average that allows for hybrid learning is 14 or fewer COVID-19 cases per 100,000. And as you can see, the county has been above 14 cases since October 11th. The chart that I'm displaying now shows final incidence rates. This means that all extraneous data has been taken out during a 3-day lag period. And that extraneous data would include things like someone having more than one test, which sometimes happens, so the health department needs to take out those additional tests in one day. People who are getting tested in Lake County but live elsewhere, or getting tested elsewhere but live in Lake County. So we'll go to the next chart, which displays more up-to-date, but actually less reliable daily information for both the county and our own zip codes. This is the data that hasn't yet had the extraneous information removed. It does show that on each day of data, the incidence rates in our zip codes was equal to or usually surpassed that of the county, and that's why we're displaying it tonight. Now, it's important to remember that each number represents a 7-day rolling average. So let's go back to the verified data for a moment. So Chris, if you could please go back a slide, which I cannot see, so I'm sure you've done it. And if we look at October 18th, with a Lake County 7-day rolling average of 22.8, that means that on that date, the rate was so high for 7 days that the 7-day average of those days was 22.8 cases per day. I mention this because this really does indicate how long it can take for the rolling averages to go back down to 14 or below. Because we're looking at averages, the number of COVID cases needs to go way down and then stay down for a nice long while before the 7-day rolling average dips to 14. And then, again, according to the health department, that dip to 14 or below needs to be maintained for 7 days before they advise a change to hybrid learning. And now let's skip forward to that last graph. This graph shows the 7-day incidence rate in Lake County from March to now. And you can see that we are back near where we were near the end of April through mid-May. So where does this leave us at this time? Well, regrettably, it leaves us on pause for a bit. We will continue to provide excellent remote learning opportunities for students, continue to hone our skills in this area, continue to look for new ways to reach students and families who are struggling in the remote environment. Excuse me. We will continue planning for hybrid learning for the 50.34% students whose families requested it for them. This means preparing classrooms for socially distanced instruction, supporting teachers to be ready to teach students who are on-site and remote. It means preparing for limited staffing changes, and I'm very glad to tell you that it does not look like we will have very many staff changes at all. That's great news. It means finishing our preparation in areas of health, safety, and custodial services. It means continuing to prepare for bus routes and changes related to meal service. We'll be watching the metrics in order to reopen the Safe Center, which regrettably is closed as of tomorrow due to these raised metrics. Now, even though we are now not looking to begin our transition into hybrid learning until sometime in January, if metrics allow, we still hope to be able to reopen the Safe Center sooner than that, and we will do so if possible. And then we will continue to watch the metrics in order to plan a transition into hybrid learning, with hope that we will be able to start soon after the new year. But the safety of our students and staff are always at the forefront of our planning. And finally, I want to reiterate what I shared last night This is very disappointing. Many predicted that it might happen, but it is terribly disappointing nonetheless. We know how excited students have been feeling about coming to school. I see how empty the GMS Learning Center is without them. We know how strongly some families feel about wanting students to be back on site. We are so eager to get our students back in our schools. However, we must do so in a way that is as safe and as safe as possible for all involved. So that is what I had to share with you tonight about that change in our plans. And I think before we would move forward into having Chris Vipond share information from the tech department, I would love to know if board members have questions or comments about this.
Thank you, Dr. Glickman. That longitudinal graph you showed of Lake County cases since the beginning of the pandemic was sobering. You think about where that latest spike started to happen was, you know, at the time we were doing this hard work with these difficult conversations about moving to the hybrid plan, and almost in concert with those discussions, you know, this spike occurs. It's very unfortunate. But what strikes me is that we're back to a level we were at the height of the pandemic. So I do think that it's the right move to delay this. I mean, we have relatively few instruction days from the time of the planned start of the hybrid model till after the holidays. So it strikes me as a prudent move. And I'm in support of it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Glickman. And I would just add that I've received some feedback from the community that they do appreciate, you know, I think there are other districts that are kind of still on a wait and see week by week basis. And, you know, friends who, let's say, might teach in those districts, but who live here are appreciative of the fact that, you know, it's sad, it's disappointing news, yet we know what's going to happen for the next 2 months. And I think there's an appreciation of, you know, it's not great news, but we all know sort of what our next couple months will look like and can plan for that versus being on a week basis, a little bit of a roller coaster. So yeah, I was in support of before and remain in support of revisiting in January. So thanks for all your work to to shift yet again.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Christine. I just want to respond that, you know, as many of us have talked about, there is absolutely no way for us to make decisions that will make everyone happy. And we know that because there are no clear answers in so much of what we're all doing. But as we could see that this is where we need to go next, the feeling was that it made sense to, while making the decision, also take some stress off of the system, which is what you're alluding to. You know, for us to continue saying, well, let's see where we are in 2 weeks, let's see where we are in 2 weeks, will just continue to press our system in a very stressed state when so many, you know, the predictions really are that that we're going to need to be remote for a while longer. So I just wanted to share that thinking back. Thank you, Christy.
Other board members? Go ahead, Chrissy.
Yeah, I also want to echo gratitude for the stress off of the system, specifically for anyone on our staff who has to scramble for childcare or learn new instructional strategies or any of the myriad of logistical concerns that you're trying to organize. So while I certainly understand that there are families who are anxious to have their kids back together and on campus, I do appreciate that we'll be able to use, or you'll be able to use this time to plan more effectively. So thank you for that. I also want to thank you for the durability of the remote plan. And again, not to minimize the concerns that certainly are tangible for many families. I'm very grateful for the planning that you did in the spring, because that planning with your administrators leads us to a plan that we can fall back on as we transition. So thank you for the durability of that plan too.
And I would echo what everybody has said and thank the district, the staff, the teachers, the families, the communities for, similar to also what Jason said earlier, for all of the feedback, everything that we have read, multiple times over, to make sure that we are trying to make the best decisions in a pandemic that is just constantly changing. And this is quite the journey that we've all been on in this pandemic. And so this is just, another reminder to take care of each other, to be there for each other, to communicate openly, and to just redouble our efforts for the families that need us, and to redouble our efforts to hopefully get the pandemic under control. So my thanks as well, and I support the plan.
Can I ask a quick question that I may have missed, so I apologize? What's your thought on safe centers reopening ahead of hybrid learning, Dr. Glickman? Do you have a kind of a trigger that you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking for is that 7-day rolling average to be back down for 7 days, back down to below 14.
Thank you.
That's what we're hoping for, yeah. Anything else on this topic before we move to Mr. Vipond?
I would just say that I concur with what everyone said. I was also say that, and Mr. Mack sort of alluded to this a little bit, but getting back to any sense of normalcy is on all of us, the entire community. It's not just what we're doing or trying to do here in the school district and the planning that we're trying to do and the solutions we're trying to come up with. The only way that these solutions are ever going to be implemented is if everybody's on board. And being on board means doing the things that you need to do to minimize the impact or further impact of this pandemic. So the sooner we can all get on the same page as a community, I think the sooner we're going to be sitting at home with our kids in school. So I would just implore everyone to do the right thing and to take heed and do the right things that you need to do, wearing masks, social distancing, all that stuff, to make sure that we can minimize any further impacts and reduce the spread of this virus as soon as possible, so we can all get back to things we like to do.
Thank you. And by the way, and I know I've said this before when we've had meetings on site, my mask is here, and the only reason it's not on my face is I am in a room with closed doors by myself, which is what our standard is in the school district for being unmasked. So just wanted you to know. All right, so we're going to lead this. So you can see Mr. Vipond has his mask, by the way, because he and Mr. Mack are both in the multi-purpose room together, very far apart, but in the room together. So they're both masked. So I want to introduce Mr. Vipond to talk with you, our Director of Technology. At our last board meeting, and maybe the one before that, I think at our last 2 board meetings, there was a lot of talk about the technology that we were looking at to improve things for students and staff as a part of as a part of any changes that we were moving into. I'll put it like that. And so Mr. Vipond has some really exciting news to share regarding all of that.
Thank you, Dr. Glickman. I am very excited to be discussing this topic tonight, and I'm going to try to get right to it, but I do want to share a little bit of background and some research that has been done since I started this summer. One of the things that I knew coming in was that we needed devices for our K-2 students, and then it was kind of evaluating and assessing where our teacher devices were. And doing the research and looking back at past purchase history and the previously approved refresh cycle for our staff devices showed that our staff devices were going to be due to be refreshed this coming summer of 2021. And we know that that with ever-changing technology, that's a long time, and it's an even longer time when we're relying so heavily on that device for remote learning, which was brand new to all of us not long ago. So we're relying on those older MacBook Airs for our teachers very heavily, and that has been one of the biggest requests that I've heard since June about our staff devices and technology needs for our teachers that continue to be successful and as successful as they can be in this time. With that in mind, I've continued to look at options and had a conversation with our Apple rep late last week, and an opportunity kind of arose that I'm very excited about. The potential to bring a teacher laptop refresh about 7 months earlier than previously anticipated, while still deferring the first payment until next July. So it's continuing with the plan that we would have been under anyway. We're just kind of speeding things up a little bit. Payment wise, there will again some lease paperwork that Mary and I will continue to work on, and would push for that first payment still when we were already planning for it. And Mary and I had that conversation back in June that was part of our long-term roadmap with technology purchases. But I will say that I've shared this information pending board approval with a number of groups, and actually all of our teachers at this point via email, and have heard all kinds of positive feedback and responses. So I know that our teachers would be very excited about this, and it would, the newest MacBook Air would be the device that we would move to. So a similar device to what they have currently, just a obviously much newer device, stronger, better, faster. That all again pending your approval. Hopefully we would bring that to the next board meeting for final approval, and then the estimated timeline, if everything goes really well, would be early January to have those devices and get those turned around and in the hands of our teachers as quickly as we could after that. Any questions?
Chris, before you go any further, I think that it's just expedient to do it this way. It appears that we may have a problem with our link on YouTube, and I'm unsure, but I've heard that from two people. One who's looking for it, and one who's looking at it a different way. So the board meeting is listed at maybe in October 10th at the moment. Is that correct?
It looks like it's October 10th, but yes, it is streaming.
It's streaming, but maybe people can't find it. Okay.
It is streaming I will see if I can edit the title.
Okay. So we should pause for a moment about this. I am wondering if there's anything we need to do, if there's anything we need to repeat, if we have community members that are not finding it, or didn't find it. And I'm wondering if sometimes we hear about that problem because people are on Facebook and looking for it that way. So maybe we can all just pause for a moment while Chris is looking at making that change, and I'm going to see if we've got folks who are, have been trying to find it and can't find it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and pause for the moment.
Yeah, let's just pause for a moment. Yeah.
Christy Miller, are you there?
Yeah, I can't tell at the moment. Okay, so we're hearing that, yeah, so people are now emailing me about this problem. Yeah. So I think as it's being fixed, I'm wondering if there's anything that the board thinks we should repeat.
I'm thinking if they didn't hear the announcement and the rationale behind going back to remote, that might be worth repeating.
Do you think I should go, my presentation was not terribly long. Would you like me to go back and redo it?
I would agree with that. If we're going to repeat anything, that would be the.
Yeah.
the one to repeat.
Okay.
Yeah, we should go over that again.
Yep.
Okay. Chris, Vipond, is the link now, is it at the right place? Is it labeled?
So I'm just gonna, if people are logging into the YouTube site, it is the only one that says live. So even though the date is incorrect, it shows live. So people should see the live, link that's going. So that should be a tip off.
Yeah, and I'm getting messages that people are looking at it, but far fewer than we're used to seeing. So I saw some there were 38 people on it. So
yeah, there's about 39 right there. Yeah,
far fewer than usual. Because I'll be happy to go back and redo that presentation, but I want to wait until we feel confident that the link is properly labeled.
Christy Miller.
Yes.
May I just have a clarifying question? Did you say the public library will be doing printing for us or publishing?
Just my understanding is just publishing,
Okay.
and one event in particular, but we were able to just reach out with them and start that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if there are folks who are just tuning in right now, we are working on getting our link fixed so that it's easily accessible for everyone. We certainly want any public viewers to be able to find us, and then we're going to go back and redo some of this meeting.
Might be a good to maybe do a quick post to the. Oh, there it is. Now the date has been changed. I can see it now as the new date.
All right, that's great.
And in no case that's going to impact the people who were able to find it with the erroneous link, right? The link itself hasn't changed, just the name of it.
Just the name.
Okay. All right. So maybe we can just do a very brief summary of, we started our meeting. We took a roll call as we always do. We did a Pledge of Allegiance. Then I think we went pretty quickly right into the superintendent's report. Is that right? Yeah? Okay. So I presented a short, some slides and talked about the message that went out yesterday, and I'm going to do that again. The good news is it's not all that long. So those of you who have been on from the beginning, maybe go do something else for a few minutes, but we're going to go ahead and do that presentation again. Chris V, let me know please when those slides are up and ready to go. Yeah. Are you sharing your, yeah, there we go. All right. Second time's the charm. Here we go. As we know, quite a lot has changed since we were last together 1 week ago. Specifically, our metrics have changed. Enough so that yesterday, the Lake County Health Department recommended virtual, what we call remote, learning for students throughout the county. And as I shared with our community yesterday, this means pushing back the start of hybrid learning for our students and staying in a remote setting for all students for a while longer. This does not mean, though, that we are halting our planning process for hybrid learning, and I will get into that in a few minutes. First, though, we will look at the metrics together. Our first chart shows incidence rates. Now, we're looking at incidence rates as the health department based their recommendation on the rise in incidence rates in the county. The 7-day rolling average rate that allows for hybrid learning is 14 or fewer COVID cases per 100,000. And as you can see, the county has been over 14 since October 11th. The chart that I'm displaying now shows final incidence rates. This means that all extraneous data has been taken out during a 3-day lag period. That extraneous data would include someone having more than one test in a day, or people who are getting tested in Lake County but live elsewhere, or getting tested elsewhere but live in Lake County. This next chart displays the more up-to-date, but actually less reliable, daily information for both the county and our zip codes. This is the data that hasn't yet had the extraneous information removed. It does show, though, that on each day of data, the incidence rate in our zip code was equal to or usually surpassed that of the county. And that's why it's displayed for you here. It is important to remember that each number represents a 7-day rolling average. So let's go back to the verified data for a moment. And Chris, if you'd please go back a slide. And if we look at our last date, with a Lake County 7-day rolling average of 22.8, that means that on that date, the rate was so high for 7 days that the 7-day average of those days was 22.8 cases per day. I mention this because this really does indicate how long it can take for the rolling averages to go back down to 14 or below. Because we are looking at averages, the number of COVID cases needs to go way down and then stay down for a nice long while before the 7-day rolling average dips to 14. And then, again, according to the health department, that dip to 14 or below needs to be maintained for 7 days before they advise a change to hybrid learning. And finally, we'll go to the last graph, which shows the 7-day incidence rate in Lake County from March until now. And you can see that we are back near where we were near the end of April through mid-May. So where does this leave us at this time? Well, regrettably, it leaves us on pause for a bit. We will continue to provide excellent remote learning opportunities for students, continue to hone our skills in this area, and continue to look for new ways to reach the students and families who are struggling in the remote environment. We will continue planning for hybrid learning for the 50.34% of students whose families requested it for them. This means preparing classrooms for socially distanced instruction and supporting teachers to be ready to teach students who are on-site and remote. It means preparing for limited staffing changes, and I am very glad to tell you that it does not look like we will have very many staffing changes at all. It means finishing our preparation in areas of health, safety, and custodial services. It means continuing to prepare bus routes and changes related to meal service. We will be watching the metrics in order to reopen the Safe Center, which regrettably is closed as of tomorrow due to these raised metrics. Even though we are now not looking to begin our transition into hybrid learning until sometime in January, if metrics allow, we still very much hope to be able to reopen the Safe Center sooner than that, and will do so if possible. And then we will continue to watch the metrics in order to plan a transition into hybrid learning, with the hope that we will be able to start soon after the new year. The safety of our students and staff at the forefront of all of our planning. And finally, I want to reiterate what I shared last night. This is disappointing. Many predicted that it might happen, but it is terribly disappointing nonetheless. We know how excited students have been feeling about coming to school, how strongly some families feel about wanting students to be back on site. We are so eager to get our students back in our schools, back here in the GMS Learning Center. However, we must do so in a way that is as safe as possible for all involved. And that brings me to the end of my report. And as we did about a half an hour ago, I know we had board members who made comments and asked questions. Of course, your comments and questions probably weren't scripted like my presentation was. I don't know if anybody has comments and questions that they want to ask again or state again.
Yeah, so I'll go first like I did 30 minutes ago and just express support for this plan. It's unfortunate, but the metrics are sobering. And, you know, for those who don't plan on going back and listening to the replay of this, I'm just in support of this plan. It seems like the prudent thing to do, and it's regrettable, and it's not what we had hoped for. When the spike in this latest surge happened, we were, you know, having those tough conversations and heart-rending discussions, and here we are, you know, 2 weeks later, and it's, you know, it's unfortunate to have to put this on pause now, but I feel like that's where we're at, and I support this.
Thank you.
I'm happy to reshare my feedback as well. Just that I think I've been hearing a lot of appreciation for us not trying to play this on a week-by-week basis leading into the holidays, and just making sure that we've set things all the way back to January, so that, as disappointing as it may be, people know what to expect between now and January and on all fronts. So I'm also in support.
Thank you, Christy. And as I commented earlier, you know, the conversation that many of us have had has been that we know there's very clear evidence that it's not possible to make decisions that are going to satisfy everyone in our community, that will make everyone happy. There are too many moving pieces. There are too many, people just have different points of view, and we know that. That stated, as we saw that we needed to make this change back into staying remote, we realized that something that we can do is take some stress off of the community. And so that was the intent of making this announcement now, that that we're not looking at it on a week-by-week basis, thereby causing families to wonder every week what's going to happen next week, and staff to wonder every week what's going to happen every week. So as we saw that it looks like, and we keep hearing that, right, throughout the country, that there is this continues to happen, that helped us to see that we needed to push it off for a good long while.
So I'll go ahead and repeat my support of this decision as well, for similar reasons that have already been stated. I also want to highlight how much I appreciate the extra time that administrators, staff, and everyone will have to think about how they're going to arrange for childcare and arrange the logistics of the change. So I appreciate that we have a little more time to consider that. And then also want to express my appreciation for the durability of the remote learning plan, because of the administrators' work, because of your work, Dr. Glickman, and also the teachers and families and students' work. We have something to fall back on, which is different than the spring. So I'm grateful for that comprehensive plan, that it is a catch for us until we can move into hybrid. So thank you.
And I'll re-express my support from 30 minutes ago as well, and echo my colleagues, and thank the district and the teachers and the families in the community that have sent messages and questions and discussion points that each of us have read and taken into consideration, and just reaffirming that we are here to take care of each other and try to make the best decisions possible as a community, to offer each other grace, to offer each other support, and to redouble our efforts as a community to try to get this thing under control.
All right, thank you very much, Board of Education. We'll move over into some information from Mr. Vipond, our Director of Technology, who has very exciting news to share that is directly related to all of the work that we're doing right now, and is also related to are the business as usual. So it's kind of nice to be talking about both things at once. Hand it over to you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Since I was hired back in June, my goal has always been to evaluate what our current needs are as far as technology goes across the district. And the initial need was making sure that all of our K2 students had a device to be successful on. We accomplished that goal, and one of the next goals was our teacher devices. We knew that our teacher devices, based on previously agreed on and board approved refresh cycles for the teacher devices, would lead us to the summer of 2021 for a teacher laptop refresh, which is, it depends on the perspective. In normal years, okay, we can make it one more year. But in times right now of relying heavily on a 5 or 6 year old MacBook Air that has been extremely challenging during hybrid and remote learning times, only remote at this point. But the goal has been to continue to see how we can support our teachers in the technology needs, and that has been one that has come to me quite frequently, of what can we do to make our teacher laptops run better at this point and get us through the rest of the year. I had a conversation with our Apple rep late last week, and an opportunity was offered during that time to kind of speed up our refresh cycle and get those move forward with a teacher laptop refresh sooner, while still deferring that first lease payment to the same time that we were already planning, to July of 2021. So at this point, pending board approval at the next board meeting, we would like to move forward and do just that. Move forward with the plan that would have originally happened, just doing it 6 or 7 months sooner, and allowing that new device to be used in whatever way teaching and learning looks like in January for our teachers, and continue to give them the best tools that we can to support their teaching and learning. I have had the opportunity to share that information with some groups of people face-to-face through a Google Meet, as well as to all of our certified teachers through an email, and have heard nothing but positive and great feedback from them. So they are all very excited about the possibility of making that happen. Again, the timeline that Apple is currently saying, we know that supply chains, and we experienced that with our K2 Chromebooks are delayed, but Apple is projecting that if we were to get approval and be able to give them the go ahead in November, that we should be able to have them in the new devices in the district by early January. And then the team would go to work again, the tech team would go to work and get those turned around in our teachers' hands as quickly as we could.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone have questions or comments for Mr. Bypond?
Hey, Chris, this is Jason LaCroix. That's really exciting news. I'm happy to hear that. I know that's gonna help a lot. The question to you, is there any market value for the retiring fleet of computers? And if so, what's the plan for that?
That's a great question, and there is. We have already been in contact with a recycler who has given us a tentative price. I will tell you, it's interesting, and there have been numerous offerings of feedback on that same plan. There are many teachers we've heard of have proposed the idea of wanting a second device to for remote learning or the potential hybrid learning. And so there have been emails flying in that have asked, can we keep the second device or can we keep the older laptop as our second device after we get the new one? I will say that the resale or the recycle value that the company is offering to us right now is very good. It is something that is definitely going to be in consideration because it is mid-year. Our rep has told us that a mid-year recycle gives us a higher value than a June or July recycle. So those are things that at this point are still under discussion as what that looks like. Is it better to kind of weighing those pros and cons and seeing what what would be better from a big picture, a financial picture, and continuing to meet the needs of our teachers.
Great, thank you.
And I just want to comment that this information is being shared as a part of the superintendent's report because it developed so quickly, and we would like to get it on the agenda for the next meeting as an action item. So we wanted you to have a chance to have heard a little bit about it, but hopefully when we bring that as an agenda item, we'll have even more information to share regarding what we would be doing with those recycled devices. We hope. Anything else? All right, well, that was the superintendent's report ×2. And I think we can move on, Mr. Matt.
All right, thank you, Dr. Glickman and Mr. Vipond. The next step on our agenda are the committee reports, and we'll begin with the Community Engagement Committee report, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Stephen. So just in review, community engagement had several goals that we shared with you quite a bit of time ago, and wanted to update you. You already know that we had our first community cafe, and that helped us identify the purpose of this year's work, which is community service, same as last spring. We've also conducted one thought exchange to identify the direction of our committee, and I wanted to report that back to you. We had some of the polarization that we've heard throughout the country, we see reflected in this thought exchange, but there's a report in the thought exchange which is really helpful, and it takes a look at where the comments received, and it looks at those comments, and then it tells us which ones were the most polarized. So if you remember, people have the option to rate comments either 5 stars or 1 star. So there were some comments that had some people rated with 5, 4, or 5 stars, and some people rated with 1 or 2 stars. In this report, it takes a look at those it categorizes them into themes. So 10 themes, and then it tells us when there's polarization, which are the comments that everyone agrees on, which is really helpful. And that agreement came across very strongly as good education. Regardless of how we felt about remote or hybrid setup, everyone rated good, that they wanted their kids to have a great education. And so we went into our planning with that information. The first thing we did was we identified our professional development goals, and we landed on Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. So we're in the process of reading that together. And then in the spring, we'll all become, the people who can attend will become certified in Dare to Lead so that we can build our leadership skills. Then the next thing that we've been looking at is a variety of community building initiatives that fall into really three primary categories. The first is instruction. So among the whole district, there's a native seed distribution that's going on right now. If people are looking for some outdoor activities to get your kids off your screens, this is a way that you could bring a small group of kids together in your backyard or in another space and plant native seeds. And if you've ever planted a seed before, there's a whole host of things you can learn just from a simple seed. So that's going on. We've heard from our community members that they want opportunities to get their kids outside and to get moving. So one of the schools has initiated a movement initiative in order to, they've got all different parts of it, but the movement is the key. And so they've been successful in that, have actually already raised $10,000 and are close to their goal of $15,000. And they have 20% student engagement at this point too. So that's fantastic. Another school a couple other schools have book fairs going on too. So there's community members, if you're looking for ways to supplement what's going on in your classroom with movement or getting outside or reading, several schools have some initiatives going on to support that. So instruction was one. Another is to support local economy. Most schools have some sort of dine and share going on, and there's various arrangements, but they've chosen different restaurants that they want to support, specifically sponsors who have supported them in the past. and they've got dine and shares actively moving. And then there's also more traditional community service initiatives that are ramping up for things like mitten trees or giving trees or 5-point drives. And the 5-point drives seem to be gaining some energy to provide winter clothing to families who are looking for warm clothing. So those things are going on across the 7 schools. And then the last thing is more process oriented, and we've refined our communication process. Dr. Diaz, I hope you got a little bit of a break this time, or a little easier this time. But we're proud to say that our communications are going out in English and Spanish, and they're distributed, as I said, through the district. Thank you to Dr. Glickman for helping us with that. And then also through the Grays Lake Library, which I mentioned earlier in the board report. The library's been great about trying to help us get some of this information out. So again, that's what's going on with community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Equity and Inclusion Committee, updates from that committee.
I'll be glad to share that we have our next meeting scheduled for November 11th. And I also know that Mrs. Braden and myself have been continuing to work with the EdRed equity committees. I'm working on curriculum ideas, and I think she is working on dashboard and overall information. So we continue not to just be doing things in our own district, but reaching out to other school districts too to be involved.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Okay, moving along on the agenda, we have a consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the personnel addendum that was circulated earlier.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroix,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
and Mack.
Aye. All right, consent agenda is approved. Next on our agenda is we have one action item, a motion to approve. I need a motion to approve the strategic planning facilitator.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any questions, discussion from the members?
Not really a question, but I just wanted to let the rest of the board know that Dr. Glickman and I had a chance to talk about the strategic planning process, and I'm excited about the opportunity to engage more members of our community, specifically external stakeholders. And we talked a little bit about having one or more of us, I'm not sure how you want to do that, but meet with the facilitators to try to figure out some ways to make sure that we're prepared going in with a vision and being able to articulate what our community wants the direction to be. And then just one more comment. We didn't talk about this, Dr. Glickman, but so I'm just going to, I personally would love to see an evaluation of the last strategic plan be part of our process so that we know we can learn from what we did last time and see how that informs where we go next.
Thank you, Christy. Any other comments or questions from other board members?
No, just looking forward to the process, and I'm excited that Dr. Glickman might actually have some brain space for it.
All right, thank you. We have a first and a second.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroix,
Aye.
Strack.
Aye.
All right, motion approved. Thank you, everybody. We have no unfinished business to consider tonight, but we do have a couple things on the new business, beginning with the update from special education. And I believe that's Mrs. Lorenzo.
Hello, I'm just going to give a moment for Mr. Vipon to present. It's a little quieter on the home front, so I don't have my double screen, so I'm going to do my best tonight. I'd like to share that this presentation has not been added or modified since it was projected to be presented in the last board meeting. So while this data is from late September, it's still very relevant, especially in light of us continuing remote through till at least January. So I'm going to start by sharing that our agenda for tonight is to talk about our current model for instruction. I have a few SEL updates because I know that we talk a lot about our mental health for our community and students. We conducted a parent survey, so I'm going to share some of those results and summarize them, as well as a staff survey that went to our special education teachers regarding the engagement of student learning and those results, and just share some highlights and stories. So under our current model during remote learning, we are offering synchronous instruction for all of our students. This includes some direct instruction, it's whole group. There's small group or individual learning opportunities through Google Meets. That's conducted with the students through the use of our paraprofessionals, our special education teachers, our related services, and other support personnel as appropriate. We are also having opportunities for asynchronous learning. And in many cases, we've been sending home items for learning. So there's hands-on opportunities for learning connected to the activities and the instruction in synchronous instruction. But there's also some opportunities for the students to be able to reinforce their skills through some technology-based educational tools. And lastly, our evaluations have been initiated to start on site. At this time, we're choosing to pause for a couple weeks after this week so we can make sure that our metrics are conducive to continuing safely. But we have been doing this at our Prairie View office with car-side temperature checks and screening of our students. And we have 2 offices where we've been facilitating one-to-one evaluations quite successfully so far. We also created social emotional learning teams. This decision was made based on the recommendations from our opening teams this summer. I worked with a group of about 30 professionals throughout this district, planning the social, emotional, and physical health for our students and our community and our teachers. So out of those recommendations, we developed a few areas to highlight, one of which we're targeting our new students to the district. We created a few meets, Google Meets, outside of school hours for students that are new to the district. And this is to build some traction, connect them to other people in their community, and really get them acclimated to their new learning system. We also have been trying to artfully create some more fun-based social emotional learning activities based on interest. And we know that this is really specific to the grade band and area to how much participation we have, but we're really trying to gear that for those age ranges. And these are also offered outside of the school hours. And lastly, our social emotional learning teams, which consists of our social workers, our psychs, and our nurses, have been developing our scope and sequence for this year with weekly social emotional learning topics. And to highlight one, we have developed a relationship with our Grays Lake Public Library, and we've been targeting the book and the topic of mindfulness with the hope that we further this partnership centered around one book, one community. In the survey for remote learning, we asked some constructive feedback. The goal was not only to inform us and how things are going, but also identify some areas that are working and identify some areas that we need to target for some growth. On the list of responses, we have found that communication with team members has been a highlight. The activities that are being sent home and planned and the materials provided for that have been positively received. And there's been some positive feedback surrounding the balanced synchronous and asynchronous activities that are designed. Some areas of growth or to target for improvement include, on the other side, more hands-on activities, more direct instruction. We did have a nice chunk of the families that reported none remotes working for their children, and more balanced synchronous and asynchronous time. So essentially what we're learning is what is working for some isn't working for others. And that just really tells us that we need to make sure that we're meeting students' needs individually and problem solving with families when things come up. We also conducted, go ahead to the next one. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed this slide. So one thing we asked for was some feedback for us to consider as we plan for returning to onsite. What you'll see is kind of the breakdown of comments. They were clustered in different topic bands. And essentially what you can see is the green, the actual like lime green, really is collectively showing some desire to come on site. And then the other area of purple is a more inclination that we want to stay remote. So we kind of have this broad sense of both ends, similar to what we're seeing in all of our data and our surveys and all of that. So we do have a challenge ahead of us to try to make sure that we're balancing what we're doing for our students, for all of our learners. Now I can talk about the engagement survey that went home to our staff. I was asking our staff essentially what percentage of their caseloads are engaged in the learning activities defined by participating as expected, defined by what their expectations are and in agreement with the families. So just to highlight some of that, given their first full caseload, they were asked what percentage of engagement did they have overall. And to highlight, they had 40 of the responses, which accounts for 89% of our staff. 46.6 had at least 90% or more of engagement on their caseloads. And then another large chunk was another 47.6% with engagement about 70 to 89%. And then I further dug deeper and asked what percentage of the caseload is engaged at least 80% or more of the time. And we equally had a nice high percentage of 42.9 have at least 90% of their caseload engaged at least 80% more of their time. You see there's a couple different colors, so we know, and there was a couple different responses. I believe that red in that first box accounts for one response. So we do have some areas where we have some engagement opportunities that we need to continue to target and motivate and work on. Next one. When I asked the staff what areas were impacting engagement the most, in a negative way, motivation, we see a lot of that with middle schoolers in general anyway, but nothing out of the norm with that age band, but certainly something that we need to make sure we target for improvement. In some cases, there were social emotional barriers that may be getting in the way, and internet connectivity, but we continue to see that that is less and less of a barrier. Our tech department's been doing a nice job responding to those needs as they come up. So I asked them what strategies increase the engagement. Our families have been very supportive and agreeable with open communication with email and chat. Our teachers are watching Go Guardian so they can see where our students are and making sure that they're actively engaged in doing what they're asked to do. Some of our staff have really been working hard to make sure those office hours are really geared to reaching out to students and supporting them. There's been a lot of adaptations and accommodations with visual schedules and other supportive tools to engage our students. I was asked to share some stories. So here are a couple of highlights that that some of the teachers have shared and some families. I highlighted many there, but I have to say that for the older students, I've heard a lot about student advocacy. Our students in the older grades, our teachers are finding that they're much more willing to ask for what they need, tell teachers when things aren't working. And that was a huge celebration because oftentimes they found that students were going to their case manager for those needs, but instead of the gen ed teacher when appropriate, and we're seeing more and more students try those things on their own. And I have to share, there are so many creative videos and pictures and I don't know, work samples that families have been submitting and sharing to our teachers. It is amazing to watch these kids do such great things with their educational teams. Next, sorry. So I wanted to highlight some key takeaways. Essentially, despite some of the challenges that we know are there and we cannot ignore those, we're going to continue to do that work. Students are engaging in the activities overall. There's a lot of variety in what they're experiencing from their remote learning. Our district has been doing a really nice job prioritizing the equity for our learners. And we're learning that the students are surprising us every day. You throw them some challenges and they show up. I always tell the staff that the staff usually have the hardest time with change. Students just come along and teach us a lot of things. Our pupil services department motto and culture is really driven around the book, Every Student, the book Culturized by Jimmy Casas, which highlights that we believe that every student, every day, whatever it takes, is how we approach providing services for our students. And despite the barriers from all angles that we're experiencing, we've learned again that the best way to solve those problems is to address them as an educational team with those families specifically. And then lastly, our district motto is we're in this together, and we're going to continue to be. Any questions?
Heather, I have a question. I remember back a long time ago when I took my one special ed class. One of the things that did stick with me is that it's really valuable to learn those strategies to help kids with their accommodations because they help all students. So I'm coming from a teacher's perspective, but I'm wondering if you've learned anything that might transfer to community engagement so that we can help parents.
You know, that's a really good question, which I'm not sure I have great answers yet, but I think that's something that we should certainly explore. I know that one thing I didn't highlight successfully was that we've been trying to build in the family university options to help provide some tools for our families. And Dr. Erin Walsh has been doing a really nice job. The most recent one was to really help families in the remote home learning environment. And then we have two others that our principals should be sharing those reminders and those topics coming up. But I'm certain we can explore other ways that we can talk about with community engagement.
Wonderful. When is the next Family University? I know there's a schedule on the website, but I don't recall. Do you have it off the top of your head?
I do not have it off the top of my head. We've been pacing them out every 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
It should be early on in November.
Okay.
Likely the second week, but I can confirm that with everyone.
I can look on the district website too. I was just curious. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Heather. I wanted to comment just real quickly that it's wonderful to hear that update and knowing what I know about my daughter having gone through the special education program in District 46. And forgive me if it was on the slide with the staff survey, but how are the teachers feeling with their planning process? Because I know there's a lot involved with. When I'm observing the teachers at the high school for Isabella now, I know that's a lot too.
I would be remiss to say that they aren't working almost double time. I mean, that's every teacher right now, and I'm sure that's the feedback you're receiving from our teachers. There's an ounce of energy that they'll never give up because they'll do what's best for kids no matter what. And I think that's pretty awesome. Of the staff that we have working with us. I know this is a huge challenge for them. There's nothing that makes them say that this is easy. Even our gen ed teachers, I think in some ways it's extremely hard for them because when they used to be able to break out their classroom in different groups and sections of the classroom, they can't. They have 20 something kids on the screen at the same time, and they have to be creative about that. And our special ed teachers have now many other ways and times where they have to break out in a different avenue, and that's challenging. And it's challenging their time for planning and prep. It's challenging their ability to be creative and make sure that they're engaging students and providing appropriate instruction for all of their learners.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, comments from other board members?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item under new business are board policies.
Yeah, I can speak about that. Our policy committee met at 5:30 today, just prior to the board meeting. We reviewed all of the proposed policies that we've received through press, and hopefully our board members in general have had a chance to review them as well. All of the recommended changes or additions from press the committee felt that we should move forward with, and are eager to vote these in at the next meeting. We did agree that there were two policies that made sense for us to kind of spike out for you and talk about. One because it's brand new, and the other because it's substantially changed. So we'll talk about those two now. I'm going to ask Mr. Vipon to talk about new policy 7345, which is use of educational technologies, student data privacy, and security.
Thank you. While this is brand new policy, I'm happy to report that this is not really new to procedures that we already have in place in our district. So many of these things focus around keeping our students safe and keeping our student information and privacy and records all safe. And those are things that, again, I'm happy to say are already happening in our district, and we already have systems in place to meet the requirements of this policy. So again, just making sure that all of our educational technologies used in the district should further the objectives of the district's educational program, and that they align with the curriculum criteria. Making sure that we do not sell or rent or lease any of our school student records, and again, just focusing on making sure that student information is kept safe. We have policies in, not policies, we have procedures in place that all of our teachers are excited to use the latest and greatest ed tech tools and new online websites, any of those tools, but they are all aware that if they want to try something new, they need to have that site approved by district admin first in order to ensure that that tool is safe, and making sure that someone on our end, right now it has been primarily Amanda and myself, that have been reviewing those privacy policies and making sure that those companies are not doing anything with our student data that we are not happy with. So making sure that those tools and the things that our teachers and our student information stays safe in all ways. The one part about this policy, there is one question that does require the board to answer. Has the board designated a privacy officer? And I am, Dr. Glickman, do you want to take it?
And I suggested that Mr. Vipon would be an outstanding option for that role, truly because this is work he is already doing, and he very graciously accepted that role if the board should so choose to name him as that officer. That's all.
Thanks.
Okay, so that's information about that new policy. Because it's new, I do want the board to have a chance to ask questions if you have any at this time. And again, we'll be talking, you have a chance again at the next board meeting if you have new questions. Anything about that one? Okay. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Goodman. Chris, just an FYI, this is a concern of mine. I've done just a little bit of research and reached out to some members in our community who work at Northwestern in their IT departments, and they've pointed out some serious concerns about some other programs. And I don't know how that impacts our district, but one of them was that just the whole, not just our school, but all schools are not equipped to prevent hackers from getting our information. So I would just want your assessment of that at some point, if that's possible, to know what we should, like, how do we know if their information can be monetized? Do we know if it's safe? That kind of stuff would be really helpful for me. Thank you.
Certainly.
Anything else for Mr. Bypond? All right. The other policy that we wanted to talk about for a moment is really quite timely. It is policy 4180, pandemic preparedness, management, and recovery. It was formerly just called pandemic preparedness. And oh my goodness, did this policy become important and further developed. So I want to just briefly review for you some of the topics that have been spiked out in this revised policy. One is about the ability to close schools if there's an emergency. And if you go back to last spring, that's when we did that, right? We had to announce schools are going to need to be closed. And it talks about how the governor may declare a disaster due to a public health emergency, and that then the superintendent may discuss with the governor and a number of different entities how to proceed. So that's one area. There is an area about the board meeting procedures. And in fact, there's another policy that kind of updates the procedures as well. And it's what we're doing right now. It's having what is mostly an off-site meeting. We don't have a quorum on site here at GMS, but we are still able to have a board meeting as long as we are following everything under OMA. We are following the Open Meetings Act. So there's a section about that. There's a section about payment of employee salaries during an emergency school closure, and talks about the need to follow any collective bargaining agreements that we have, needing to follow any applicable laws. That seems pretty important. And following the need to follow the terms of any grant under which employees might be assigned. We have to make sure we follow those. And then there is a section of a suspension of in-person instruction, remote and/or blended remote learning day plans, and how that will work. And interestingly, there's a question here that we have to answer about whether or not we have a, what's the language they've used here, an e-learning program in the district. And this is confusing to people sometimes because clearly we have a remote learning program, right? But remember that an e-learning program is really what you use if you have an emergency like a snow day. And in fact, at our next board meeting, and I know I'm jumping in a little bit about talking about the next board meeting, but Mr. Lewis will be kind of running a hearing, for doing an e-learning plan, basically so that we can use our current remote learning procedures in the event that we have an emergency like a snow day, so that we don't actually have to have a snow day and push the year back, but instead can use those plans. So that's a summary of the changes in that policy. Policy committee, are there any other policies that you wanted us to talk about in this board meeting at this time?
No, I think those are the two calls we were hoping for.
Okay. All right, great. And these will come back at the next meeting. And of course, you know, anyone is able to review them and provide comment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Glickman and Mr. Vipand and the policy committee. Next on our agenda, topics for future agenda items, which I'm assuming includes the policies.
We are doing that. So give me one moment, please. Okay. All right, so one is the ability for our board to register a delegate for the IASB Virtual Delegate Assembly on November 14th. So remember, that's part of what would typically be our tri-conference that isn't occurring the way it typically does. So that can be discussed at the next meeting because those need to be, they have to be registered by November 4th. We talked about there'll be a public hearing for e-learning that Mr. Lewis will be sharing. Mrs. Worling will bring forth a contract amendment from Arbor, our meal service provider. This is because we are now operating under the summer food service program, and so the contract needs to be amended. And the laptop purchase that we were talking about earlier, that would also come. And then obviously those policies again as well. Cabinet or other administrators, are there any other topics that you wanted to bring forth that we didn't mention? Or board members, are there other topics that you had hoped would be coming up?
I was hoping that we could talk about forming a sustainability advisory committee. If you remember at Triple I last year, Jim and I went to a session that Huntley put on, and Huntley was able to save their district, if I remember right, it's over $1 million by just looking at energy savings and energy management and sustainability in general. So I was wondering how you would feel, or I'd like to put on the agenda. I would love to bring a proposal forward for having an advisory committee. It would not require any board members to be on it unless you wanted to be, but just someone, a group in the community that could take a look at Huntley's presentation. And also the Boulder Valley School District has done quite a bit of work in sustainability. They have a 10-year plan that they're about to refresh and move forward even in the midst of COVID. So if we could just have a few folks that might be willing to take a look at Huntley and the Boulder Valley School District to see what they're learning about money and revenue, that I think that might be helpful to us moving forward in our strategic planning process. So I guess I'm wondering if that would be helpful to you, or if you're willing to talk about it at the next meeting, or if I should just drop it.
I think we can add it to the board agenda for discussion, absolutely. I agree.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, well, I can move to, I want to share two more pieces of information. One is that the following meeting, there will be quite a few topics related to finance, including a presentation and approval of the annual audit. So our auditor will be presenting. There'll be a discussion of the 2020 tax levy and an approval of the resolution of estimated levy, along with a information of the annual statement of affairs. And Mary, Ms. Swirling, anything you want to add to any of that? That was it? Okay. Oh, can't hear you. You are on mute.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We're right on schedule. Yes, those are the reports that are processed and reviewed at this time of year.
Great, thank you. And finally, I simply want to comment a little tongue-in-cheek that our next meeting is in 2 weeks. At this time, we are not intending to continue with our every Wednesday board meetings that we've had for the past 3 weeks, but we always can have a special meeting if that is so needed. Just needed to get that in. All right.
All right, thank you, Dr. Glickman and everybody. And I guess I get to preside over a slightly shorter meeting than normal, but we get to the public comments at this point. Are there any public comments, Mr. Vipond or Mr. Wolk?
Mr. Wolk is going to be doing them tonight, but first I have to put a plug in for my colleague that the Parent University will be on November 10th, and the topic will be stress in the brain, helping kids cope. I know that conversation came up earlier and I didn't have it, but I wanted to make sure that I supported her and got that out there. So for our first public comment, we have Ashley Mahoney. Ashley writes, "You are all saying that we know what the next couple months will look like, but if you have a crystal ball, if you all have a crystal ball that I don't, please share. Our district is so many steps behind other districts because you keep making decisions for long periods of time. We need to be looking week by week because that is how quickly things are changing. Organizations that are doing that are being the most successful because they are ready for changes. We could have safely been in schools in October, but the district made a trimester-long decision to start the year, so we missed that opportunity." Excuse me for a second. Sorry. We could have safely been in schools in October, but the school district made a trimester-long decision to start the year, so we missed that opportunity. What if the antigen test stopped driving our numbers up, the numbers go back down before the end of November? I understand that we may not be able to get all grades in, but over and over, we have talked about the high needs groups, special ed and young elementary. Those children could be starting school. If you're going to still sit back and wait for January, what will be the reason that we cannot start then? Are you going to make sure that the class changes are made with teachers at the start of trimester 2? Because that shouldn't become an excuse in January. You have that data, make the changes now. Lastly, with the money you are saving, not powering buildings on a daily basis, I hope you look into hiring more social workers and psychologists because the district is going to need it badly for student supports when you finally open our buildings. The needs that will keep pushing off are going to be rearing their ugly heads when we get back into school." The second comment is also from Ashley Mahoney. As much of the rest of this meeting is about normal business, new computers for teachers, as though we are operating as usual, why has there been no map testing? I'd love to see where my child is at since there has been no assessments and no indicators of where he is at academically. Everyone is so happy with the remote learning plan. I, for one, would love to see where we are actually performing. Please get these plans in place. Our next comment is from Jeremy Heinz. Is there a way to re-explore a hybrid plan that doesn't include lunch inside? Also, is there a way that you could evaluate a hybrid plan that doesn't threaten the lives, health, or livelihood of our teachers and staff? Our students are doing an outstanding job given the situation that our teachers are doing an outstanding job given the situation that we're all in. Is there a way to partner with them in the planning process? I know that there is an advisory board, but I also know that you had talked about investing in a survey tool that you have only used once. And our final comment comes from Jeremy Hines as well. Why did the board vote last week on October 14th to open schools to hybrid learning if the metrics didn't even support it on October 12th? According to the Lake County Health Department, the incident rate for the 7-day rolling average was 15.1. I'm not a mathematician, but 15.1 is still greater than 14, right? 14 is the threshold to stay remote learning for all. And that concludes our public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Wolk. We don't have a closed session today, I'm assuming. Okay. Okay, that we can take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second.
LaCroix,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
Very good. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take
Good
care.
night.